I want you to picture something. Just put yourself in this scenario. You're driving, let's say you're crossing the border from Texas into Mexico.
Right. Okay.
You are now inside a country that is basically sitting on oceans of crude oil. I mean, it's one of the greatest geographic lottery tickets on the planet.
Yeah, the assumption is just, automatic. Like, if you have the oil beneath your feet, your citizens get cheap gas.
Mhm.
It's common sense.
Exactly. It feels like this unbreakable law of nature. But then you pull up to the pump and you look at the price and it hits you like a slap in the face.
Oh, it really does.
Why on earth are the citizens of this massive oil-rich nation paying significantly more for their own state-owned gasoline than the people just a few miles north in the U.S.?
Right. It completely shatters any conventional understanding of, how natural resources are supposed to work. Like, the people who actually own the oil are paying a premium to burn it.
It's the ultimate oil nation absurdity.
Yeah.
And that contradiction, that massive glaring glitch in the matrix, that's our mission for this deep dive today.
It's a crazy story.
We are tearing into this incredibly fascinating working paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research. It's by these economists, Davis, McRae, and Seira. And they give us this front row seat to an absolute economic earthquake.
Which is, the deregulation of the Mexican retail petroleum market.
Right, which, I mean, it doesn't sound like a thriller, but then you realize the timeline.
Yeah, that's the kicker. They froze a nationwide market for 80 years, like 8 decades of an absolute ironclad state monopoly.
Oh.
And then suddenly, they just decided to shatter the ice.
And what happens when you do that? When textbook economic theory just violently crashes into the messy, corrupt physical reality of millions of people just, trying to get to work.
Well, you don't get a smooth transition, I'll tell you that. You get a survival game. You get these wild distortions, invisible cartels, and just a total masterclass in how monopolies weaponize the very idea of fairness.
So let's look at the map. Or really the lack of a map, because for 80 years, if you drove across Mexico, you saw exactly one thing.
Yeah, Pemex.
Yeah.
State-owned petroleum giant.
Every single one of the 11,000 gas stations in the country. Green, red, and white. One brand. One product.
And crucially, one price. Just, set from a desk at the Ministry of Finance. It was a total one-size-fits-all model.
I really want to dwell on that for a second, because if you grow up in a free market, you're used to price wars, right? You see a station on the left side charging like $3. The guy on the right sees a chance to steal your business, so he drops it to $2.98.
Right, that dynamic is the actual heartbeat of a functional economy.
Yeah.
But in Mexico, for almost a century, that heartbeat was completely flatlined.
Totally dead.
You could be in the dense, chaotic center of Mexico City, right? Or you could be out in the middle of a baking rural desert, hundreds of miles from anywhere. The price on the sign was identical.
And, politicians love to sell that as a feature. I can hear the speeches now, like, we are protecting you. We're keeping prices stable. No one gets gouged.
Yeah, it sounds utopian.
Right, it sounds great.
It sounds utopian until you hit a global crisis. That is exactly when the mask slips. And the NBDR authors point to a very specific moment where this system just revealed its true nature. The year 2014.
Oh, the great oil crash. I remember this vividly. Global crude prices just basically fell off a cliff.
Yeah, and if you were driving in the U.S., it was this massive windfall. Gas prices plummeted. The raw material cost less, so the end product cost less, just a basic supply and demand.
Yeah, Mexican drivers didn't get a windfall.
No, they got the exact opposite, which is insane. While the rest of the world was watching prices drop, Mexican prices actually rose.
Wait, they rose?
They rose. In fact, they rose so aggressively that they crossed the threshold. Mexican state-owned gas became significantly more expensive than American free market gas.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if the raw material, the crude oil, is suddenly dirt cheap globally, how can the government possibly justify raising the price at the pump?
Because the price at the pump had nothing to do with the cost of oil, like zero. It had to do with the government's massive fiscal deficits. Pemex was bleeding money. The federal government was bleeding money.
So they basically turned the gas stations into a secret ATM.
That is exactly what it was. It's a hidden tax. The government sees the global price of oil drop. Normally, that margin would go back to the consumer, right?
Right.
Instead, the government says, well, we'll just keep the retail price artificially high, pocket that massive new spread, and use it to cover up our own financial mismanagement.
It's like a baker whose flour supplier cuts prices in half, but instead of passing the savings to the neighborhood, the baker charges his own family double for a loaf of bread just to pay off his gambling debts.
Exactly. And he can only do that if he's the only baker in the entire country.
Because the drivers have absolutely no exit. They can't boycott. They can't go to a competitor. They just have to absorb this incredibly regressive tax to, live their lives.
It's the ultimate betrayal of that whole "we're protecting you" narrative.
Right.
But the illusion of fairness goes way deeper than just the price on the sign. It bleeds into the actual physical movement of the fuel.
Right. The researchers call out this concept of flat rate freight.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is where the monopoly actually starts to destroy the physical infrastructure of the country. Because Pemex didn't just own the gas stations. They owned the entire upstream.
So the pipelines, the wholesale terminals, the delivery trucks.
Everything. And they operated on a system where every single gas station owner paid the exact same wholesale price for the fuel to be delivered. The freight cost was completely flattened.
Which, again, playing devil's advocate, sounds incredibly fair. Like, why should a business be penalized just because of where it's located? Equal delivery fees for everyone.
Well, let's test that fairness in the real world. Imagine you own a gas station right next door to the massive Pemex refinery. The truck fills up, drives 500 feet, and dumps the gas in your tank.
Sure. The actual cost of that transport is literally pennies.
Right. Now imagine you own a station hundreds of miles away, up winding, treacherous mountain roads.
Okay, so that requires specialized trucks, massive amounts of diesel just to run the fleet, hazard pay for the drivers, crazy wear and tear.
It costs a fortune. But under the Pemex monopoly, the guy on the mountain and the guy next to the refinery pay the exact same delivery fee.
Because the government just averages out the cheap trips and the expensive trips.
Yes. And by doing that, they completely sever the link between geography and cost. And when you destroy that link, you destroy innovation.
Wait, how does that destroy innovation?
Think about it from an infrastructure perspective. In a free market, delivering gas up a mountain is so expensive that some private company would look at it and say, there has to be a better way. Let's invest $1 billion, blast a tunnel, and build a direct pipeline. We'll cut our costs in half and dominate.
Oh, wow. But under Pemex, why would anyone ever build a pipeline?
They wouldn't. The flat rate system mathematically punishes efficiency. If you magically lower the actual cost of transport, you don't get the savings. The savings just get vaporized into this giant, inefficient national average.
So you end up subsidizing the most bloated, outdated, expensive logistics network imaginable. It's literally an economic black hole masked as equality.
And the craziest part, this system was in place for 8 decades. Imagine 80 years of zero incentive to optimize a supply chain.
I want to know what that actually looks like on the ground because, it's one thing to talk about flat rate freight margins in a textbook. It's another thing to actually pull your car up to one of these stations.
Exactly. And the NBER researchers, they didn't just stare at government spreadsheets. They did something deeply necessary, an autopsy of the living system.
Right. In July 2017, right as the monopoly was starting to crack, they went out and did a massive physical survey of 332 Pemex stations in Mexico City.
A metropolis of over 20 million people, the beating heart of the economy.
And let's look at what they found, because some of these numbers, they feel like they belong on another planet. 100% of these stations sell regular gas, 97% sell premium,
Totally normal so far.
but only 42% sell diesel.
Less than half.
I am genuinely struggling to process that. You have a city of 20 million people, you have commercial delivery trucks, municipal buses, construction equipment, all running on diesel, and you cannot find a pump at the vast majority of stations.
It's the ultimate symptom of a deaf market. Like if an American gas station owner sees a line of commercial trucks driving past his business every day, desperate for fuel, what does he do?
He takes out a loan immediately, rips up his pavement, installs a diesel tank, and captures that revenue. It's free money.
But under Pemex, the station owner doesn't have the autonomy or the financial incentive to do that. The state decides what goes where. So you have a metropolis essentially starved of commercial fuel simply because the central planner didn't update the map.
And it gets smaller, too. The stations only average 5.7 pumps. For an urban megacenter, that is a tiny footprint.
Which means lines. It means waiting. But the true rot of the monopoly isn't just in the fuel. It's what happens when you step out of your car.
The non-oil services. The toll booth for a toilet without soap.
That is the perfect encapsulation of the era.
In the U.S., gas is almost a loss leader, right? The station makes pennies on the gallon. The real business is what happens inside the building.
The coffee, the hot dogs, the lottery tickets. It's a high-margin retail environment.
Exactly. It's a mini mall designed to separate you from your cash while you fill up. But the survey in Mexico City found that 68% of these stations do not even have a convenience store.
7 out of 10 stations are just concrete islands. No coffee, no snacks.
I just don't understand the business logic. You have a completely captive audience. A driver is physically trapped at your pump for 5 minutes. Why wouldn't you try to sell them a bottled water?
Because you don't have to. The core of capitalism is luring the customer. If I want you to buy my gas instead of the guy across the street, I make my store cleaner, I brew better coffee. But if I'm the only option for 10 miles and my price is fixed by the government, my incentive to lure you is exactly zero.
Because I'm going to buy the gas anyway. I have no choice.
Right? So why would I spend money building a store, hiring staff, dealing with inventory and theft when it won't sell a single extra drop of gasoline?
Wow. Okay, but the bathroom situation, this is where it crosses from lazy business into just sheer degradation.
The bathroom data is perhaps the most shocking part of the entire NBER paper.
98% of the stations had bathrooms, but only 21% of them were free. You have to physically pay to use the restroom at a business where you are already a paying customer.
Which, okay, perhaps they're charging a fee to maintain pristine, beautiful facilities.
That's the punchline. You pay the toll, you walk in, and less than half of these bathrooms even have toilet paper. 47%, and only 45% have soap.
You are paying for a service that is fundamentally broken.
53% of the stations had trash scattered on the ground. 71% had visible, uncleaned oil spills. They are documenting a dilapidated, hostile environment, and yet millions of people accepted it every single day.
They accepted it because, well, imagination requires a reference point. If every station in the country has operated this way for your entire life and your parents' entire lives, you don't demand soap. You just bring your own. The consumer completely loses the muscle memory of demanding better service.
But there's a darker layer to why these stations were so bare bones. It isn't just a psychological lack of competition. It's a mathematical straitjacket created by the government, the profit trap.
Yes, the retail markup.
We talked about how the government fixed the price of the gas. What we didn't mention is that they also fixed the margin the station owner was allowed to keep, and it was brutally thin.
Between 5.2% and 6.0%.
When your gross margin is capped at around 5% and you legally cannot lower your price to drive up volume, how do you keep your business afloat?
You slash your operating costs to the bone. You don't buy soap. You don't hire janitors.
You engage in toxic cost cutting. And the biggest cost for any business is labor. Now, here is the craziest cultural difference. You do not pump your own gas in Mexico. It is entirely full service. There are attendants swarming the pumps.
Right, so you have a massive labor force at every station. But the owner has no margin to pay them.
So the researchers point out that these workers have absolutely no base salary. They are entirely dependent on tips from the drivers.
It's a brilliant, vicious system. The government squeezes the station owner to near zero profit. So the owner simply passes the entire cost of labor onto the customer via social pressure.
And it gets worse. In some of the more extreme cases documented, the attendants actually pay their bosses. They pay a fee to the station owner just for the privilege of putting on the uniform and hustling for tips at the pump.
They're essentially renting the concrete they stand on.
This is the zero-base salary black hole, and I want to tie this directly to the deregulation. Because when foreign companies finally enter this market, their whole pitch is going to be, hey, we are more efficient. But if the local stations are already paying their workers literally less than zero, where is the fat left to cut?
There is none. The baseline efficiency on the retail level was already mathematically maximized. Maximized in a pathological, exploitative way, sure, but from a pure spreadsheet perspective, you cannot get cheaper than free labor.
Which brings us to the explosion. 2016. The pressure cooker finally pops. The government, facing reality, enacts these historic energy reforms.
The 80-year ice age ends. Private enterprises are legally allowed to enter the retail market.
But the first shot of this revolution wasn't a price war. It was something entirely visual.
It was a plastic sign.
Right. A local group called Hidrocina rebrands their stations. Then another group, La Gas. And suddenly, for the first time in a lifetime, a Mexican driver sees a color other than Pemex green.
And then the international heavyweights arrive. British Petroleum, Shell. BP builds 197 stations in just over a year. The map is suddenly fractured into competing logos.
But the government knows they're playing with fire. If they just unfreeze prices nationwide overnight, it would be pandemonium. So they create this staggered map, a slow rollout in 2017.
They started the price liberalization at the very top of the country, the northern border, Baja California and Sonora.
Why start there?
Because of the cultural buffer. The people living in Tijuana or Nogales are already deeply integrated with the U.S. economy. They cross the border constantly. They understand how a competitive gas station works. They know how to shop for prices. It was basically the only region in Mexico with the consumer muscle memory to handle the shock of fluctuating prices.
So they tested it on the border and then slowly rolled the unlock south state by state until the entire massive country was a free market.
But this is where the whole narrative of the free market hits a massive brick wall.
The same oil paradox.
Picture this. You're driving in Mexico City. You see a brand new, gleaming British petroleum station. The bright green and yellow canopy, it looks like the future. It looks like salvation from the dirty Pemex station down the street. You pull in.
I'm thrilled. I'm finally buying high-quality international gasoline.
Except you aren't.
Wait, what am I buying?
You are buying the exact same state-owned oil you've been buying your entire life.
Hold on. If I'm at a BP station, under BP sign, paying BP, the liquid going into my car is Pemex.
100%.
Okay.
Because while the government allowed foreign brands to open retail storefronts, the upstream infrastructure, the pipelines, the refineries, the storage terminals, was still totally monopolized by Pemex.
So BP, Shell, Exxon, they rush in, they build these beautiful stations, but they're all just buying their wholesale gasoline from the exact same Pemex truck.
Yes.
Then what on earth is the consumer actually paying for? If the liquid is identical, where's the competition?
The competition shifts entirely to the aesthetic. The NBER authors highlight this pivot to product differentiation. Exactly. When you cannot compete on the quality of the gasoline because you don't control it, you compete on the brightness of your LED lights at night so people feel safe. You compete on having toilet paper in the bathroom. You compete on the convenience store.
You're basically running a hospitality business that just happens to dispense state-owned liquid.
Precisely. The monopoly was technically broken at the street level, but the ghost of Pemex was still haunting every single underground tank.
And that leads to a deeply unstable environment, the economics of chaos. Because, unfreezing a market doesn't mean you get perfect, rational competition the next morning.
No, it means you get a blindfolded brawl. The authors draw a brilliant comparison to the United Kingdom's electricity market.
Oh, how does that connect?
When the UK deregulated electricity, the utility firms had been handheld by the government for so long, they literally didn't know how to set a price. They were like zoo animals released into the wild. They didn't know how to hunt.
So what did they do?
They just guessed. They threw prices against the wall. They would jack prices wildly high to see if people still paid. Then they would panic and drop them wildly low. They were searching for what economists call the Nash equilibrium.
Meaning a state where everyone's strategy is balanced and nobody has an incentive to change their price unless someone else does.
Right. But finding that equilibrium took the UK electricity market 3 full years of absolute chaos and volatility.
3 years of blind guessing. And the Mexican gasoline market is walking into the exact same fog. But with gas, the stakes are so much higher because of the physics of everyday life.
Yeah, the inelastic extortion.
Explain that, because it sounds like a legal mafia.
Gasoline is what we call highly inelastic in the short term. If the price of an apple doubles tomorrow, you just buy an orange. You substitute.
Right. But if the price of gas doubles tomorrow, I can't exactly put orange juice in my tank. I still have to drive my kids to school. I still have to commute an hour to my job.
Exactly. Your demand does not change. You are trapped.
Yeah.
So when the government suddenly says to these new terrified station owners, hey, you can charge whatever you want, the owners quickly realize a dark truth.
These people have to buy gas anyway. Why are we citing each other to lower prices? Let's just keep them high.
It is a green light for localized robbery. And the consumer is practically defenseless because of that upstream Achilles heel we talked about earlier, the 5% trap.
Right. The math here is devastating. Let's say a maverick independent owner wants to play the hero. He wants to slash his prices by 20% to steal the whole neighborhood's business.
He literally cannot do it.
Because his entire retail markup is only 5%. 90% to 95% of the cost of that gasoline is already baked in before it ever leaves the Pemex refinery.
So even if the retail owner reduces his own profit to zero, the consumer barely notices the discount. For the Mexican citizen to actually feel a massive life-changing drop in gas prices, the savings must come from refining, transport, and pipelines.
The upstream, which
Yes.
is still a total monopoly.
It is a masterclass in half measures.
Yeah.
You deregulate the cash register, but you keep a monopoly on the warehouse.
So if the math is rigged, and the stations have every incentive to price gouge a trapped populace, what stops them? Does the consumer have any weapon at all?
They do, and it is entirely based on their socioeconomic status.
The power of being poor. This is one of the most counterintuitive, brilliant insights in the entire NBER paper. Why are these new corporate giants more terrified of a lower-income consumer than a wealthy one?
It all comes down to search costs and the value of time.
Okay, let's compare two drivers. One in Los Angeles, one in Mexico City.
Right. In Los Angeles, a high-income environment, a driver sees gas for $4 on her corner. She knows there is a station across town selling it for $3.90. Is she going to drive 20 minutes through traffic to save $1 on her tank?
Absolutely not. Her time is worth vastly more than $1.
She accepts the markup for the convenience. She doesn't search.
But in a middle-income country like Mexico, the economic calculation inverts.
The relative value of the fuel is much higher compared to their daily wage. A few pesos difference per liter takes a massive bite out of their weekly income.
So what do?
They hunt. They will drive past 3 stations. They will coordinate with family members. They will aggressively, ruthlessly search for bargains.
And because they're willing to put in the time to hunt, they become the ultimate regulatory force. The stations realize, if I raise my price by even a fraction, this entire neighborhood will abandon me.
This aggressive search behavior is the single strongest force keeping the new retail monopolies in check.
So the Mexican government sees this happening. They see the citizens desperately hunting for prices. And the government decides, let's help them. Let's use technology.
The gasoop.
On paper, this sounds like a triumph of public policy. They build a smartphone app. It shows you the real-time prices of every single gas station around you. Total transparency.
A digital map of perfectly mapped prices.
It eliminates the search cost. You don't have to drive around anymore. You just look at your phone, find the cheapest gas, and go. Basic economics says this should force everyone to lower their prices to compete.
Basic economics says that. But cartel theory says the exact opposite.
This blew my mind. How does an app designed to save people money accidentally become the ultimate weapon for price fixers?
To understand this, you have to understand the hardest part of running an illegal cartel.
Let's play this out. Let's say you and I own the only 2 gas stations in town.
And we meet in a dark alley and agree to both keep our prices artificially high, $5 a gallon. We will both make a fortune.
The agreement is easy, but human nature is greedy. The hardest part is trust.
Exactly. Because tomorrow morning, I'm going to be tempted to secretly lower my price to $4.90.
Right, because if you drop to $4.90 and I'm still at $5, every single driver in town comes to your station. You betray me and you get rich.
Secret cheating is the Achilles heel of every cartel in history. To keep prices high, cartels need a way to monitor their members and instantly punish anyone who lowers their price.
And what did the government just hand every station owner in Mexico?
A real-time, perfectly accurate surveillance tool.
The gasoap.
If I try to secretly lower my price to $4.90, I can't hide it. Your phone pings, you see my new price instantly.
And I immediately lower my price to $4.90 to match you. I neutralize your advantage. I punish you for trying to cheat the cartel.
The app eliminated the fog of war. It gave the stations perfect visibility into each other's moves.
It's like trying to bluff in a high-stakes poker game, but the dealer just forced everyone to play with their cards face up on the table. You literally cannot bluff.
So nobody does. Nobody lowers their price because they know any discount will be instantly matched and neutralized. The app, designed to create competition, mathematically enforces a high-price stalemate.
It's tragic, but it gets even more sophisticated. Because they don't actually need to meet in a dark alley to form this cartel. They do it in broad daylight, using secret codes hidden in plain sight.
Tacit collusion via decimals.
You pull up to a gas station.
Yeah.
The price ends in a 9 or a 5. Say 19.99 pesos. We've all been trained to think this is just a psychological marketing trick. 19.99 looks cheaper than 20.000.
But the researchers analyzed the data and found something far more insidious. In this newly deregulated, chaotic market, those numbers aren't marketing. They are signals.
Focal point pricing.
Without ever picking up a phone or sending an email, stations signal their intent to cooperate by clustering their prices on these specific decimal endings.
It creates an invisible floor. If every station in the neighborhood independently decides to always land on a price ending in 0.99, it removes the temptation to drop your price by a single penny.
Because if you drop to 0.98, it breaks the pattern. It looks messy. It signals aggression to the other owners. So you stay at 0.99.
The consumer looks at the sign and thinks, a bargain. But the station owners look at the sign and see a coordinated pledge of non-aggression. It is brilliant, legal price fixing.
So we have a market struggling with invisible cartels, razor-thin margins, and upstream monopolies. But the physical legacy of those 80 years of state control is still sitting right there on the map.
The spatial nightmare, the density imbalance.
If you want to see how blind a state monopoly is, you just have to count the stations.
The paper highlights this staggering comparison. Let's look at Baja California Sur. A beautiful region, but relatively sparse. Lots of open space.
In Baja, there is one gas station for every 4,620 people.
That is a very high density, plenty of pumps to go around. But then you zoom into Mexico City, the absolute beating heart of the nation. 20 million people, some of the most gridlocked, apocalyptic traffic on the planet.
You would assume the market would provide massive infrastructure for that demand.
But the reality, in Mexico City, there is only one gas station for every 24,700 people.
It is a suffocating bottleneck.
It completely defies all logic. The place with the most cars, the most money, and the most demand has the fewest places to buy fuel. Why is it so inverted?
Because for 80 years, market signals were completely irrelevant. Pemex didn't look at traffic patterns to decide where to build.
What did they look at?
Local zoning laws, bureaucracy, political favors. If it was politically easy to drop a station in a rural area, they built it. If dealing with Mexico City's urban planners was too much of a headache, they just didn't build.
They built an empire based on administrative convenience, not human need.
And this is where deregulation is supposed to be brutal but necessary. Theoretically, a free market should look at this map and initiate a massive violent correction.
Right. Those isolated stations in the boondocks serving nobody should go bankrupt and close. And capital should flood into Mexico City, buying up real estate and building hundreds of new stations.
But that correction is being strangled in its crib.
By the empire striking back. The kill switch.
Economists call it vertical exclusion or input foreclosure.
Let's play this scenario out. I am an ambitious, independent entrepreneur. I see the massive lines in Mexico City. I lease a vacant lot. I sign a deal with Shell. I build a state-of-the-art station. I have free bathrooms, premium coffee, perfect lighting. I am ready to destroy the lazy Pemex station down the street.
You cut the ribbon. You are ready for your first customer. And then you go to turn on the pumps.
And nothing comes out.
Because the Pemex delivery truck never arrived.
Wait, Pemex just forgot.
Remember the upstream monopoly? Pemex still controls the wholesale fuel and the delivery trucks. So the state-owned giant is simultaneously your direct retail competitor on the street and your sole supplier behind the scenes.
That is a lethal conflict of interest.
They hold the power of life and death over your business. If your new Shell station starts stealing too many customers from the local Pemex station, the Pemex bureaucracy can simply tweak your wholesale price.
Yeah.
Or they can suddenly experience logistical delays and deliver your fuel 24 hours late.
And 24 hours without gas at a gas station means my customers leave, my reputation is ruined, and I'm fast-tracked to bankruptcy.
It is the ultimate invisible weapon. A monopoly starving its new rivals by choking off the very input they need to survive.
It makes the whole idea of deregulation feel like a cruel joke. You invite these players into the arena, but you keep your boot on their oxygen hose? How does a country ever break out of this? How does the story actually end?
Well, the authors of the NDER paper point out that the architects of the reform knew this was a danger. They did build in a safeguard, but it requires immense patience.
The 70% threshold.
Yes. The regulators implemented asymmetric wholesale price controls, basically strict rules that prevent Pemex from using that kill switch and gouging independent stations.
But those rules aren't permanent.
No. They remain in effect only until Pemex's share of the wholesale market drops below 70%.
Meaning the government has to hold Pemex's hands tied behind its back until true, massive, international competitors manage to build their own pipelines, their own import terminals, and their own tanker fleets to completely bypass the state.
It is a marathon. Building physical pipelines takes years. It takes billions of dollars. It takes navigating immense political resistance. This transition is going to define the Mexican economy for a decade.
Which brings me to a thought that has been haunting me since I first read this paper. We are watching a nation undergo unbelievable pain. They are suffering through price inversions. They are fighting invisible cartels on smartphones. They are trying to untangle an 80-year-old bureaucratic nightmare just to get a functional gas station.
It is a massive societal undertaking.
But look at the calendar. They are doing all of this right now, today, at the exact moment in human history when the rest of the industrialized world is desperately trying to pivot away from fossil fuels entirely.
The EV revolution. Electric vehicles.
Yes, every major automaker is committing to phasing out combustion engines. Trillions of dollars are moving into battery technology and charging grids.
And meanwhile, Mexico is enduring a decade of market chaos to build a better gas station.
Did they just kick open the door to a free market, or did they just spend unimaginable political capital to perfect the dinosaur right as the meteor is entering the atmosphere?
It is a profound tragedy of timing. By the time this market reaches that beautiful textbook equilibrium, the product it sells might be obsolete.
That is a staggering thought, and I want you to hold on to that the next time you are sitting in your car, wherever you live. You pull up to a pump, you look at the price on the sign, and you expect it to make sense. You expect the geography of the station to be rational. But as we've seen today, sometimes the surface tells you absolutely nothing. Sometimes the price you pay is just the final visible shadow of a much larger, much darker game of survival.